Welcome back for another Blacksburg Buzz. Today we're talking about one of the new women's basketball recruits for the Hokies. They signed Amani Jenkins, a 6'2" power forward slash center out of Iowa. She attends Johnston High School. Jenkins was originally committed to Marquette back in October of 2023, but it took her a while to get on the Virginia Tech train once Megan Duffy was brought on to the team. Jenkins is the number 3 player in Iowa by Prep Girls Hoops and the number 82 player in the country by ESPN's Hoops Girls. So clearly, a pretty decorated and renowned high school basketball player so far. Just finished her junior season at Johnston, so she's got one more until she's ready for some D1 basketball. And I think that'll be good for her, but still a very good pickup for Virginia Tech so far. Doing a little bit of research, reading some articles, and checked out some websites on gobound.com. She led the state in the 22-23 season in points per game with 19.7 as a sophomore. That whole year, she was dominating. She had nearly 12 rebounds and 1 assist per game, with 2 steals and 2.6 blocks as well. So really getting it done on both sides of the floor. She was probably the most dominant player in high school girls basketball that season in Iowa. Just absolutely, there was no one that could stop her. She shot 46.6% from the floor that year, so not as efficient as you'd like to see, and a pretty solid 76.6% at the free throw line, which is a pretty good number for a high schooler. You'd like to see that develop a little bit the older she gets and as she moves into college, but that's not too bad as a high schooler. Her junior year, she was a little bit down statistically, but she was a bit more efficient. She shot almost 60% from the floor, and her free throws only dropped a hair down to 73%. That junior season, 12.5 points per game, which is down pretty significantly from the 19.7 number. That's about 7 points. But she also had a little over 6 rebounds, 1 assist, 1 steal, and 1 block. So she just didn't have as good of a season, but that's still a pretty good season overall. Put up some good numbers. You can tell that clearly you want to see her develop a little bit in her court vision just based off of that 1 assist number. But as a big, assist isn't really what you tend to be looking at. She's got that steal and that block, which really help her show that on the defensive side, she's a solid player. And obviously, the points speak for themselves. Before we dive more into what Jenkins can do on the floor, let's talk about today's video sponsor, BetOnline. BetOnline is your #1 source for all your sports betting needs this season, from baseball, golf, and soccer, right to all the top fights in the UFC, MMA, and boxing. Every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of our over 150 slot games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Use the promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for your 50% free bet credit on your first deposit up to $250. Bet online, the game starts here. So I did a little bit of looking at some of her highlights and what other people were saying about her. And for Amani Jenkins, the things that really stood out to me is she looks good in the post. She's comfortable down there. She's comfortable under pressure, which she handles really well, including double teams, which is really important for a big. If you're down there and you're dominating, you're going to see a lot of double teams, and teams are going to make you shoot from the outside. They're going to make you kick and pass out to other players and have to make shots outside of the paint. So handling pressure well in the double team is very important. In addition to that, she's pretty agile for her size. She moved around pretty quick in what I saw with high screens. She was swinging the ball well, driving into the lane. Things that you really want to see, especially out of a power forward. Doesn't matter quite as much when you get to being a center, but as a power forward, you want to see someone, driving into the lane. You want to see him be able to move around screens well and get open, maybe run some pick and rolls, some pick and pops, stuff like that. And I think she'll fare pretty well with all that. She's definitely more of a post player. She's really at her best when she's close to the basket, especially with her back to it. When she's got her back to the basket and she can bust out some post moves, she can, spin, fade, whatnot, and just get down low. I think that's where she's really at her best. So definitely more of a post player, but I think to play at the higher level and really excel, she's going to need to work on her shot a little bit more. I didn't get to see a ton just because everything I saw was mostly her down low in the post or getting down low into the post. But I don't not necessarily a three-point shot she really needs to develop, but perhaps a little bit stronger of a mid-range shooter, just enough to keep teams on their toes if you do step out to, the short wing or near the free throw line. But I think she'll hold up just fine in that regard. Obviously, Amani Jenkins is a good rebounder. That was one of her big numbers, especially from her sophomore year. 12 boards per game is a great amount. And, you want to see her after a little bit of a dip her junior year. You want to see her get that back up in her senior year. She did swap schools, so that could play a part of it. Just the different team, the dynamic, the playing time, the competition. I'm sure some of that played into those numbers dropping a little bit. But you want to see those get a little bit further back to the sophomore number in her senior season. But obviously, she's still a good rebounder. She's got a good amount of height at 6'2", so you really want that for Virginia Tech. They're a team that has really rebounded well in the last couple of years. I mean, last year, when you've got Liz Kitley and Clara Strack and, Rose Mishaw and Olivia Summiel, you're going to have good rebounding. So you want to make sure you can keep that despite some player turnover, despite a new coach. Rebounding is one of those things where if it's weak, you're going to struggle. It gives you a lot of extra opportunities on the offensive side if you can pull down those offensive rebounds. And if you get them on the defensive side, it kills possessions right there. And sometimes it turns into fast breaks. If you have good rebounding, a lot of times you can get better fast breaks, and you just prevent the team from getting extra opportunities, which is huge. So a good rebounder in Amani Jenkins. She also seems to have a pretty decent handle on the ball for a big. Sometimes when it gets to those power forwards, those centers, depending on who, even just like a forward, it can be a little bit of troublesome with the ball handling. And it seems like Jenkins is pretty solid with the ball in her hands. She looked comfortable and she was able to blow past a few different defenders in what I was seeing. So I think that could be a decent thing for her, is just being comfortable with that. A lot of times bigs aren't comfortable with the ball in their hands too much. They really rely on getting it when they're in their spots. And sometimes what really separates a good big from a great big isn't being able to get the ball and do what they do best when they're already in their spot. It's having the ball in your hand and being able to get to your spot after that. And I think that's one thing that when I was watching Jenkins play, that really stood out to me, was she was totally fine with the ball in the short wing, out on the outskirts of the paint, just a little bit extended. She was comfortable with the ball in her hands, driving into the paint, getting down low, and getting to her spots where she could make post moves, not just catching the ball there. So that could be one very big thing for Virginia Tech. And obviously, her defense is a big part. She's going to have tougher competition, but Megan Duffy's been recruiting Amani Jenkins for some time now. She was recruited to Marquette all the way back in October of 2023 when she originally committed. So Megan Duffy has had her eye on Amani Jenkins for a while now. Obviously, she sees a strong player that she can take her strengths and level them up into a great D1 player. She sees that her weaknesses are things that can be worked on. and that she thinks that the rest of the team will complement well. So clearly, Megan Duffy sees that Amani Jenkins is a great player and she'll excel at the next level. Like I said, she's going to have tougher competition, but defense, another solid part of her game. She's putting up good defensive numbers. It seems like she's got active hands and having a good amount of height to her. That's big. It's really tough to drive in on players that are significantly taller than you. At 6'2", she's a pretty good size forward. She'd be an undersized center if they do go that route, but as a power forward, or potentially if you wanted to run a really big lineup as a 3, I think she could fare fine in those regards. Now, looking at the roster for the 25-26 season, when she'll be at Virginia Tech, in terms of the guards, assuming everyone stays where they're at, obviously with the transfer portal, you never really know. But it'll be Carly Wenzel, a redshirt junior, Samaya Suffren, a junior, Mackenzie Nelson, a redshirt sophomore, Layla Wells, a sophomore, and Kate Sears will be a freshman that season. At the wing, Lonnie White will be a senior. Then you get into the forwards, Karis Baker, a junior, Kale Peterson, a sophomore, Maya Hazelton, a sophomore, Amani Jenkins, a freshman. And then moving down to the centers, Ramia White will be a sophomore. So once again, when it comes to Amani Jenkins, I really expect her to be predominantly a post player that's going to create some pressure down low. I think we'll definitely see her more as a power forward rather than a center. But whenever White isn't in the game, I could see her being like the 5 in a small ball scenario. It just depends on what lineup you're playing and who the opponent is. Obviously, she doesn't really have the height to be a true center. I think Maya Hazelton might fill out that potential 5 role in the small ball a little bit better, and Amani Jenkins be like a true 4 all the time, just because Hazelton has a little bit more height. But regardless, I think there's potential for like a small ball 5 sort of lineup. I mean, we did see that a little bit with Rose Mishaw. Sometimes she'd be down there in the post when Kitley was getting a breather before we really saw too much of Clara Strack. So that could be a way where, Duffy takes this lineup as well, just depending on who's playing. If the other team, doesn't have too much height and you can afford a smaller lineup, maybe you need a little bit more speed, I think Amani Jenkins could fit into that well. But regardless, she's a pretty strong player. She's fairly high up in the Iowa and the country rankings, both by ESPN and Prep Girls Hoops. So I think that really stands out. I mean, one of the players above her in Iowa is one of the top players in the country. So she's got some pretty tough competition. And obviously, like being the number 3 player in a top 100 in the country, that kind of speaks for itself in a way. She had a great sophomore year, a little bit lower junior year, but shifting schools, things are going to happen. That's just kind of how it goes. If you swap schools, swap coaches, swap teammates, a lot of times your numbers are going to dip a little bit, and that's just something that's going to happen. But she's a good post player. She's got pretty good speed and agility for how tall she is, works with screens well, drives into the lane pretty well. She has strong ball handling skills. She handles pressure with the double team, and she just looks good overall in the post. So I think she'll be a strong complementary player to this team. I think by the 25-26 season, we're really going to see Carly Wenzel just dominating. I think she's going to blow up either next season or the year after. She did have a really good season this year, and I think with a little bit less star power out in front of her, we might see her break through a little bit on the offensive side. She's been amazing defensively, but I think we see Wenzel break out a little bit, and there'll be a lot of good players around for Amani Jenkins to take after and learn. I mean, she'll have Karis Baker in her junior season and 2 sophomores with her in Kale Peterson and Maya Hazelton to really help show her the ropes and acclimate her to the team. So I think this will be a good team for a few seasons to come. Obviously, we don't know too much past the 25-26 season. Obviously, there's a couple of players, and coaches always have their eye on who they think might be up next. But I think we've got a good team for the next couple of years to come, and Amani Jenkins should play a strong part in that. Now, stay tuned later this week. Virginia Tech just signed one of their best recruits in recent memory for both football and baseball. Dual sport athlete Micah Matthews just committed to Virginia Tech today out of Turner Ashby High School. So I'll have a video on that. I really want to bump that ahead to the front of the line just because of how strong he is as a recruit. The second highest recruited player in the last 6 recruiting classes, and probably the top baseball recruit we've ever seen at Virginia Tech. So stay tuned for that episode. It is going to be a fun one.